Your glory, glory, honor, and power forever, ever. 1 second. YouTube can be like this sometimes. I promise. Even if we just meet our original and we go today, we'll do it. I just need to quickly do something on YouTube. Be glorified. Glory to, glory to, glory to. Glory to, glory to, glory to God. Hello, morning. I think that's Fred Hammond. That's Fred Hammond, Abi. Shamangbo gospel, Black American gospel. Everybody's writing Rishala. Do you know Fred Hammond? To the whole, to the only God. Just a second, please. Just want to say, I'll explain what I'm trying to say with this original thing. One of the reasons I don't start, but anyway, I didn't need you. Thank you. More for Jujo. Somebody knows Fred Hammond. Thank you. Thank you. All right. There's a reason I don't like to start. I think I'm giving myself a lot of stress because of this thing I'm doing now, because time's in low. But there's a reason I don't like to start the story from Obatala, because some of the forebears of Obatala actually worshipped Orishanla in Yoruba history, by the way, and it became the idea of like one of the major gods, not supreme deity. This is long before the idea of, how do I explain now? Jesus, long shall know me. This is long before the idea of Orisha being heroes. The concept is more of primordial deities, if I can use that word. You know, a lot of Orishas are humans, but the concept of Orishanla predates the idea of Orisha being heroes. Oh God! Something tells me that I'm complicating things. But let me ask: is it sounding complicated? I just want to ask. If it is, then I'll maybe find a way. So what I'm saying basically is that Orishanla is, let's use stories. No, thank God. Oranfe only no. Baba Bo Orishanla, and he was the first leader of the Confederacy of the 13 settlements in Ife, the first chairman of the Confederacy. Obatala was the last chairman of the Confederacy, and between them were many, many years, some will say centuries. They elevated Obatala to that place much later, and then instead of looking at what's his name? Let me tell you the evolution. Oranfe, Obo Orishanla, Ṣùgbọ́n òun ni first chairman. Later on, you now had Obatala. Obatala, in bowing Orishanla, whether worship or venerating Orishanla, would now have something that they can relate with, and for them it would be Oranfe, because they knew he existed. Orishanla was not a human. It was more like a primordial spirit. Like, I'm using the word spirit loosely, a primordial being, right, attached to the hills. But all this thing I'm saying, I can tell you the books you read. You can read Ife Shrines by Emi Fabumi, and you read the history of the Yoruba people by Siri Banji Akintoye. So they had the connection they had with Orishanla was Oranfe, because they knew that one, they could see him. So it's like you go to some churches and you see a picture of Jesus. That's not Jesus, but you get the point. That's not Jesus, but they shall put a picture there. That becomes like a representation of Christ. So Oranfe become a representation of Orishanla. Then much later, when Obatala himself passed, he was now elevated to Orishanla, and Oranfe was no longer used as a representation of Orishanla. It now became a deity in his own right. So now we have Oranfe Onile now as a separate deity in Ife. And then you now have the Orishanla that they used to sing by Oranfe Sori Obatala. Anyway, the point is that today you can say it's Obatala, but I don't like saying it's Obatala because in a way it uses the idea of Orishanla itself. It wasn't really about a person. It was about an energy before the person then came later and its stuff was appropriated to the person. That's a very long answer to a very simple question. Where did you stop, Orishako? Orishako got us into all of these things, Abi. And somebody asked us about... so I was saying that some of those people in some of those religions had issues with Christians in Abeokuta. Again. And I'm not seeing very well. I'm not seeing. Please come. Number. There's something is not working quite right. You know what? Move this thing, yeah? Just a second, please. Move it there. No, not the laptop, this one. Okay. No. Okay. It's good. Thank you. We're good. All right, YouTube is back up. Okay, good. Let's just do this for Facebook, and we're back. Patito's gang. We are back. All right, so we got into all of that because we're discussing names of deities. So we're saying that Orishako was about agriculture. I just remember now. I think I even saw something close. Orishako was a deity attached to agriculture. Orishanla was actually originally attached to like mountains, hills, before of course now became about Obatala. So Orishanla is right from Orishako, and Orishanla is not Olodumare. Olodumare was never worshipped, or never, your Bible don't worship Olodumare. He's a supreme being. He is the supreme being, but there is no place to venerate or worship him. But Orishanla is venerated or worshipped. I hope I answered the question with that very long-winded stuff. All right. So most especially is opposition from the custodians of Ifa, Ogun, Shango, and Orishako in particular because it interferes with their worldly gains. Orisha. They call God Orisha Sha? Educated stream. I think they actually call God. I'm tempted to read some things about Orishanla from some of these books, but I don't want to change the title. In some cases, people call God Orisha. I've actually heard people call God Orisha, but I've never heard anyone call God Orishanla. Orisha is almost like an appellation. When they say Kolobo Oke, tó bá ní Kolobo Oke wọ́n ní pẹ̀lú Orisha Oke o. Wọ́n máa pe Orisha, wọ́n á pe orúkọ òkè yẹn, for instance, wọ́n bá ní Kolobo Oke ní Ìbàdàn. Òkè tó ṣe jù nínú ìtàn Ìbàdàn is Òkè Ẹlẹ́ẹ̀lẹ́. Orúkọ òkè yẹn náà máa dá, wọ́n ní sọ pé kó lọ bọ Orisha Oke. Wọ́n á ní kó gbé kinní kan kó lọ sí Òkè Ẹlẹ́ẹ̀lẹ́. Àbí kó lọ sí nǹkan kó lọ sí òkè báyìí. Á lọ bọ òrìṣà tó wà ńbẹ̀. In my experience, hey Jesus, I don't make no song because I can't live in church. But you get the point. So when you come, one dárúkọ òkè yẹn gangan, òkè yẹn ló máa fi sọrí nǹkan tẹ́ni ẹ fẹ́ ṣe. Wọ́n ní kò ní jẹ́ abstract Orisha Oke. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. But we cannot keep researching it. We might find something more. It's just that, we speak based on research and based on what we know. If you have something else, you can also share, and then we'll see. We'll exchange notes. But I know about Elele a lot, because if you study, there's no way you're going to study history of Ibadan and you will not see Elele, because Elele is a major from the very foundation of Ibadan. So why would they chase you from church talking about Yoruba things? No, I'm not talking about Yoruba things. When I start talking about Konlogbe Boni or the Orisha Kinikan or Yoruba Koni, that's we are going spiritual already. No, I was just joking. Nobody can change me from church. You know, there is a thin line between culture and religion, and they're not the same. But I mean, man, lobo. Anyway, we are here together. How did we get into all of this? Most especially is opposition from the custodians of Ifa, Ogun, Shango, and Orishako in particular, because it interferes with their worldly gains and comfort as the divinity of agriculture and a host of other Orisha. Other examples are burying the dead in the house and turning back on annual festivals and feasts. It was also difficult to identify some African Christians by their names because many of the captives bore European names. This was just one aspect of the tendency to convert the African out of his culture. Hence, the Christian immigrants at Abeokuta laid the pattern for identifying a Christian on the basis of his English dress and other European cultural practices. We said, once you hear names like Coker and George and Johnson and Williams, they are telling you that they came from Sierra Leone. Okay, they were Ritanese, Frederick, all those names, So those are Sierra Leonean names. They are names that you see that are coming from Brazil, like Darocha and Da Silva and all the names that you mentioned last time. As a result of his observation that many of the Yoruba that arrived in Badagry moved further inland into Abeokuta, Birch Freeman visited Abeokuta from Badagry in December 1842, and he was received well by Shodeke, the chiefs, and the emigrants. Later visits by CMS missionaries were also accorded similar reception, and so Henry Townsend settled in Ake, while Ajayi Crowther settled in Igbein, establishing CMS missions in these two locations in Abeokuta in 1845. Respect this man, Ajayi Crowther. Hence, Abeokuta, with its receptive Alake, welcoming chiefs and accommodating ex-slaves, became the center of mission activities for both the Wesleyan Methodists and the CMS. Abeokuta is very, very important, and to think that Ajayi Crowther had worked there since 1845. He only went to the Niger mission to Onitsha in 1857. So he was in that place for 12 years. I also mentioned the other day that it was in that place that the first newspaper in Nigeria's history was printed. The paper is called Iwe Iroyin Àwọn Ẹ̀gbá àti Yorùbá. In case you're not here, recap. And we also explained that the name sometimes is confusing, and people have used that name to also try to create a dichotomy between Oyo people and the rest of Yoruba by saying that they were the ones that were called Yoruba because they wrote Iwe Iroyin Àwọn Ẹ̀gbá àti Àwọn Yorùbá. And last week I read from a document from the 1860s, where it was from 1860 actually, where they talked about the paper that was published in 1859. So the paper was first published in 1859. They now reported it in 1860. And if you were not here, I'll just quickly read, just in case you were not here, I'll just quickly read what that was about. It's going to be very, very fast. Where is that? Fine. About the close of last year, October 25, 1859, appeared the first number of a Yoruba newspaper. It is edited by the Reverend H. Townsend and printed and published under his direction by the converts at Abeokuta. It is called Iwe Iroyin Fún Àwọn Ará Ẹ̀gbá àti Yorùbá, which means a paper of information for the Ẹ̀gbá people in the Yoruba country. In other words, the translation was not correct. It wasn't Fún Àwọn Ẹ̀gbá lọ́nà kan àti Fún Àwọn Yorùbá lọ́nà mi. It was actually supposed to be Fún Àwọn Ẹ̀gbá ní country, ní orílẹ̀-èdè Yorùbá. They wrote it, by the way. This is from 1860, so we're not making anything up. Mr. Townsend writes, I have set on foot a Yoruba newspaper. My first number is out. I am writing the second. My object is to get the people to read. That is, to beget the habit of seeking for information by reading. It is very difficult. End of. The price is 120 cowries, equal to 1 penny. There is both African and European news in it. So it gives you an idea what happened in Yorubaland. The idea of reading began in at least the way it is right now, began in 1859 with the newspaper that Eric Townsend started publishing in Abeokuta. Then we went on to talk about David Hindera, because the mission moved from Abeokuta to Lagos and Ibadan. It was from Lagos and Ibadan, especially from Ibadan, that now began to penetrate other parts of Yorubaland like Ijaye and so on and so forth. We talked about David Hindera publishing, he translated Pilgrim's Progress into Yoruba, while he was working in Ibadan. By the way, the church at Kudeti, that was where David Hindera was, St. David's Church. Church Tawa Kudeti, Church Tawadaleni. That's one. Number two. Also, you must have heard of the Olunloyos, Yejide Grammar School. I grew up in Ibadan, so maybe that's why I'm talking like this. If you don't know Ibadan, this may not mean so much to you. But Yejide and Olunloyo, they were the first set of pupils that went to that school, right? And we had a governor in Oyo State. What was that? It wasn't like I knew him like that. No, I actually knew him. He passed on last year. Was it this year? It was this year. He passed on this year. Omololu Olunloyo and Yejide and the Olunloyo, the first one, they were the first set of pupils in the school that David Hindera began in Ibadan. So, what else did we talk about? We also talked about how Christianity grew in Eastern Yorubaland, particularly in Ijesha and Ekiti towns, and the role of the slaves from Ibadan. In other words, the slaves, by the way, the word slaves here, we understand the context, Abi, is mostly the returnees. By the way, some of them were influential people before they take, just to be clear. Excuse me, we mentioned the other day that Ajimoko the first, Oba Astrop, Frederick Astrop, was a prince of Ijesha, right? And he was taken as a slave. Then eventually he returned. So a lot of those who were taken as slaves were also not, it wasn't just, rather that. Some of them were like people of stature. And some of them, of course, were not anything, but they got educated and also grew. Anyway, the word slave here doesn't refer to, don't call them slaves. They were returnees. So that's why they use that word. So it says here, as liberated slaves continued to arrive from Sierra Leone, Brazil, and Cuba, the missionaries told local rulers of the population of their subjects in Sierra Leone, endearing themselves to these rulers by helping them to bring these subjects of theirs back. So they began to help bring some of those people back into Yorubaland. An important point to note in the Christianization of Yorubaland, particularly Ijesha and Ekiti towns, as well as other eastern part of Yorubaland, is the role of the slaves from Ibadan, Abeokuta, and elsewhere, as well as ex-slaves and free laborers from Lagos. These slaves and ex-slaves had become Christians in their places of slavery, and they took their new religion back home. By the way, some of them were also enslaved in Yorubaland. Like we mentioned the other day, that before Ajayi Crowther was taken on the ship that was going to the New World, they had exchanged him about 3 times between Yorubaland and Eweland, present Benin Republic. They had moved from somebody's hand to another person's hand, so they were slaves in Yorubaland back in the day as well. So a lot of them helped with the spread of Christianity in Yorubaland. They extended the missionary work of the European missionaries to their places of origin in advance of the coming of European missionary agents to these parts of Yorubaland. Some of them traveled before every other person even arrived. I'm going to move very fast to something very important. Everything we're discussing is important apparently, but I don't want to repeat everything. But let's quickly read about the episode in Ota. Abeokuta, as the center of the Yoruba mission, was under the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Sierra Leone. However, nearby communities of the Yoruba missions, such as Ota, which by 1864 were not yet occupied by European missionaries, were placed under Crowther's control. The Ota congregation under Reverend James White, a Yoruba from Sierra Leone. Ajayi Crowther, Samuel Crowther, James White, Samuel Johnson, all those names, Henry Carr, they're all Yoruba people. Reverend James White, a Yoruba from Sierra Leone, has started to compose original Yoruba hymns, described as native airs. These native airs, which were songs of suitable scriptural composition adapted to the tonality of the Yoruba language, conformed to Yoruba traditional music, much more than the translated words sung to European hymn tunes introduced by the missionaries. Crowther welcomed such a development. He emphasized that the replacement of the old by absorbing all that was best in it required time and the application of several well-cultivated minds working in an atmosphere free from distrust and suspicion. Such unique and deep insight expressed by Crowther on the Ota development did not influence many other parts of the Yoruba mission at that time, and its apparent limitation to the Ota area must have enhanced the fertility of the Ota environment as a nursery for the development of the use of traditional art forms in Yoruba Christian liturgy. It's important to mention these things because you hear Ota and you don't hear things like this, that some of the first set of people that began to sing using Yoruba tune. By the way, why is that important, by the way? You see, European music is based on the diatonic scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Yoruba music is pentatonic. Do, re, mi, sol, la, do. If you want to repeat the root. So our music is based on 5 notes. All the songs that we sing in Yorubaland, for the most part, I say for the most part because there are some parts, like in Yewa, where you have the introduction of a fourth, but that's technical. Let's leave that matter. The point is, generally speaking, we use pentatonic scale, do, re, mi, sol, la. If you don't, and you start using the Oyinbo scale, the words will not make sense to the average person. Oluwaku ishe oe is as if you are talking, because the scale you are using is similar to what you would use when you are speaking. La 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 sol la mi la. It is based on the pentatonic scale. When they brought the hymns from the Oyinbo, they would just take a song that was sung, of course, to their own tune, written in their own tune, and then they will now interpret the words. That's why, let me see if I can find a song. At the Yoruba ones, because I've trained myself, to sing more of those ones. If you translate blessed assurance, for instance, into Yoruba, it will not give you the right meaning. But I don't use an example. I want to use a popular example. I don't know if you may not know blessed assurance. Any church person here, come church. Well, here's my point. I can't remember anyone right now. I know the English of blessed assurance, but I don't know the Yoruba. So I need the one that I know both Yoruba and English. No, Ṣùgbọ́n kan bẹ́ẹ̀ láyé mi is actually, it's actually on Yoruba scale. It's on pentatonic scale. She was actually right. God bless you, Baderinwa. Afọpẹ́ fọ́lọ́run lọ́kàn àti lóhùn wa ẹni ṣóhun yánu. Ṣé rí ibi tí mo lọ rèé? Ṣé rí pé tọ́ pé afọpẹ́ fọ́lọ́run. It's on the scale, but doesn't have the meaning that it should have in Yoruba language. When you say afọpẹ́ fọ́lọ́run, afọpẹ́ fọpẹ́, Yoruba people don't sing like that. I think it's now thanks be to our God or something like that. Afọpẹ́ fọ́lọ́run, a Yoruba writing a song will not write it that way because ọpẹ́ does not exist. Ọpẹ́, what's ọpẹ́? There's no ọpẹ́. There's ọpẹ́. There's ọpẹ́. Afọpẹ́ fún Ọlọ́run, no fẹ́ sọ. In other words, if you want to sing to, let's say you are talking to Yoruba people, tó ti kàwé, tó lọ síléèwé, tó ní kankan ṣe pẹ̀lú àwọn òyìnbó, you may when you tell them afọpẹ́ fọ́lọ́run, they want to ask you what do you really mean, even though you are saying Yoruba, but you are setting it to the tune of the Europeans. I hope you got what I'm saying. So what they did in Ota was to write based on our own skill. And the easiest one that I can use to explain really is what Reverend J.J. Ransom Kuti did much later, Fela's grandfather. He did with a song like Ekpo Mbe Wa Mbe O. Now said Moti ni Jesu Mololuwa. So you see, he's saying as if he's talking. So easy for you like him on so Moti ni Jesu Mololuwa, Moti ni Jesu Mololuwa, Erobami, Oe, Erobami Tori Moni Jesu. So it's easier for people to sing it. It's more natural to them. What I'm trying to say is this: up until this time, and even after this point, everybody was singing using the European style. They just change the lyrics. They just interpret or translate the lyrics, and then you sing to the tune. But in Ota, they were changing both the tune and the songs and the lyrics. And the reason was because they wanted it to be more natural. And the reason it did not matter in other places was because they were under the bishop in Sierra Leone, who clearly was British. That wouldn't even mean much to them there. But Ota was under the jurisdiction of Ajayi Crowther. So he allowed that thing to thrive in Ota. Excuse me. It's important to mention that because I think from time to time we should be acknowledging the good things that our fathers did. Someone says they are the only Akunleko. God is here and that to bless us with the Spirit. I didn't go to Anglican church. I was born and bred in CNS. By the time Orimolade came along, those ones just went fully into writing hymns. Of course, they still use Anglican hymns, by the way. They use CMS hymns. But for the most part, they wrote their own. And it wasn't perfect, but it was a bit better than what was in Anglican at the time. Because they tended to use Yorubas, the pentatonic scale, more than the diatonic scale. By the way, I hope I'm communicating. Let's read a few more things. I think I want to move away from this because I've done a lot of today. Now to recap. Let me read some to you from this paper. 826. Talomoni Ọlọ́run ìbàrẹ̀ o, Ọlọ́run ọ̀gá ògo, ìwọ lànà, ìwọ lẹ́ni. Talomọ. Fẹ́ mọ àwọn tí wọ́n máa ń wo àwọn kan máa sọ bí wọ́n ti rí orin yẹn tán bá ti sọ. Talomọ orin yẹn. You do. You're one of those people. Lola has opened it up for. I was watching an interview, somebody now sang that song. I was like, what? Ibao, Ori Adeshe Ibao. You know that man that wrote Kotoro? You know it's an Alaji. Alaji Ajileye. Yoruba, we're just an interesting group. I'm alright story. You think I deserve meeting with Awon Aje? Yes, it was Ajileye. Alright, let's get back to this now. According to Peel, Mumbo. Okay, there was a term that came up later that was called cultural nationalism, but let me just go back. I was going to start with cultural nationalism today, but apparently I knew I wasn't going to be able to get into it fully. That's why I spent more time talking about what we did before. I spent too much time on the news and reactions. But let's read some things here. Let me go back just a bit to give you context. Peel observes that the Yoruba saw Christianity as a religion of the book, and so Christians were most commonly described as Onibuku, that's book people. The main books that made Yoruba Christians Onibuku were the Bible and the Yoruba reading primer, known as Iwe Abidi, or the Book of ABC. Interestingly, this primer contained religious materials as the main text for reading exercises. Furthermore, early Christian missionaries to Yorubaland were suspicious of anything even remotely associated with Yoruba indigenous religion. They gave no room to distinguishing the content and the form, thereby avoiding any worship modes employed in indigenous Yoruba religion, including songs, musical instruments, dance, and Yoruba verbal art of eulogy. What's he saying here? He's saying basically that when the Europeans got to us, they did not differentiate between culture and religion. And sometimes it may be difficult, to be honest. For instance, there are certain drums that you use for Shango. There are certain drums that they play, only Ogbonis play in Yorubaland. If you know, you know. I'm sure you know. So for them, and then there's of course drums that you play for Egungun. So in their minds, in their very limited thinking, the assumption is that since they are playing that drum for Egungun, that drum is a religious thing. And it's a mindset that even some Yoruba people still have today. You use words. They say, oh, that word is for something. That word is a word. Most of our words, right, were words that, just about every word, evolved with usage, not with religion. And the crazy part is, when you study some of these things, it's called that the ignorance of the Europeans is being celebrated as the knowledge of some Yoruba people today. In their minds, everything associated with Yoruba culture was religion. Therefore, they said no to everything. No dancing, no music, no drums, no bata, no shekere, nothing of those things. Why? Because they are all part of your indigenous religion. People are still thinking that way today, assuming that everything that we do in Yorubaland is our religion. It is everything. No. There's a culture, there's a faith. Unyibos did not come to help us separate those things. At that point where they have interlinks, or that's not the word. What was that word? Where they're what was that word now? What is that law? We use it a lot when you're talking about feminism. Intersection, right? There'll be intersections, right? But it doesn't mean that they are the same. So think of Venn diagram. You have something here, you have something here. There's intersection, but that doesn't mean that everything here is here. They are still separate. The intersections are there, but they are still separate things. And the mistakes that the British or the Europeans made at the time is to assume that just because it is Yoruba, is pagan. Just because it's Yoruba, is dedicated to one deity or one religion. And some of our churches also made that mistake until recently. There are some churches in Yorubaland where they didn't allow gangan, because they thought that it is dedicated to a particular deity. But even if it was, there are things that will eventually become part of your culture, regardless of the root of that thing. There are things that are done in Europe today that are literally not even Catholic in nature. Many of those things were even pagan in nature, if I'm going to use that word pagan. But it's a different thing, because the difference between what Yoruba people did, we're going to get into the depth of this thing next class. The difference between what Yoruba people did, Yoruba Christians, and what Europeans or Catholics did in Europe was that the Yoruba people never syncretized Christianity. I respect our elders. They never syncretized Christianity in Yorubaland. There was no syncretism. The Europeans, especially Catholicism, there was a lot of syncretism. All across Europe, even in South America, in Brazil, even after Yoruba people got to Brazil, they still syncretized. Catholicism does a lot of syncretism. What it means basically is this: different faiths will merge together, and then you create something new. The Yoruba Christians did not syncretize Yoruba religion or Yoruba or any Orisha with Christianity. What they did was to embrace their cultural identity while holding on to Christianity as a separate faith. And that takes a lot of work. Someone says, what about CNS and Celestial? CNS did not syncretize. The syncretism you see later on. CNS started in 1925. Okay? By the way, we're going to have a session on Mr. Molade, I promise. He had done a lot of work in Jos. Baba Yen was Amoko. We had traveled to Jos, it was from Akoko. I had gone to Kaba, to Ilorin, traveled all the way, eventually landed in Lagos in 24. By 25, decided CNS. In the 1930s, CNS began to split. Between 30s and 40s, we had 7 different groups. There are 7 different groups. I'm going somewhere. The original CNS that Orimolade started, there was nothing like syncretism. Syncretism means that you will borrow something from another person's faith, or borrow maybe not just something, a practice, and then now bring it in and now add it to Christianity. Are there groups that did it later? Yes. Was that how CNS was founded? No. A lot of people do not know that CNS broke into 7, and some of them began to do some very crazy things, and even go back to the Old Testament to go and be reading things that have nothing to do with Christianity. Those ones exist. They'll now be using things, and I'll be adding to things. I'm talking about those ones. I'm talking about the founding fathers. Those ones were not about syncretism. What they did, they allowed the expression of Yoruba culture, but their faith was still Christian. For instance, you're not going to see anybody back in the day cook on one church go fila. Why? In our culture, we don't even wear fila when we are greeting kings or when we go to shrines. As a sign of respect, that culture they brought it to Christianity. I'm just using that as an example. And then it got even bigger eventually. Someone wrote something, said, Babami, it's still some type of syncretism. No, that's not syncretism. Syncretism is, let me give you an example now. Syncretism is, let me give you an example. Let me use candomblé in Brazil. The Yoruba slaves didn't really want to leave their deities. Listen to this is how you know syncretism, and this is what Catholicism did in Europe, by the way. They didn't want to leave their orishas. So what did the Catholic Church do? The Catholic Church did not push them away. The Catholic Church adopted those orishas, so that while the people studied themselves, like instead of worshiping a saint, they will just have Shango or Eshu or Yemaja or something. The Catholic Church now adopted that thing in the church in Brazil. That's syncretism. So last, we'll change the name. We'll change the names of your Orisha, but we'll take them into Christianity. Okay, so I could call Shango St. Gregory, for instance. You will know what it is, but so that you can come in, we'll call it that. That's syncretism. What about the orikis of the Orishas used in church today? That's language. That's not syncretism. That's culture. Because the oriki that was used for that god came from the language, not from the god or from the Orisha. It's from the language and observation. There's no deity that came with any word from heaven. The word you use as appellation for that deity is a word that you made up as a person that understands the language. The deity did not bring words from heaven. All the words we use, there are really no Christian words, for instance. There are no Christian words, there are no Muslim words. All this one that they're saying Muslim Islamic word, there's nothing like Islamic word. It's actually Arabic. It's within the context of the culture, not the religion. The religion is the one that takes from the culture. The culture is not really taken from religion. What the culture can take from religion is probably the practices of the religion, but not the words. If the religion brings up any word, maybe it's just somebody flexing himself and creating things. E.g., Isi. He didn't have that word until Ajayi Crowther. But that is the work of a linguist, not the work of a priest. If I see Orisha and say, Songiri, Lagiri, Lagiri, Kakaka, how did I see that? It's through observation. It's not like the deity gave me a word. I'm the one using my understanding of Yoruba language to describe what I'm seeing. When I see another deity that does something similar, I will call that deity the same thing. So linguistics, although yes, some words will now be attached to particular personalities or deities, which is how the world works. It's the same thing that Yoruba people even did. I mentioned earlier, Orishanla was never Obatala. We later transposed it. We called it Orishanla. He didn't call himself Orishanla. We called Orishanla, and okay, Orishanla did not come to meet us and say, why must you call Obatala Orishanla? We want to call him that. So forget Christianity. Even inside Yoruba religion, I don't like using the word because there's no Yoruba religion, but it's even inside our own indigenous religions, we have transposed and extrapolated and being confused láti BCB, not out of disrespect. It's just that think of what I said earlier. You look at someone like Obatala and say, and he want to elevate him to that point, and you elevate him to the point where the deity they've been worshiping before he was born, you name that deity after him and say this is now the new deity. But the one that did it. Is there religion in there? Yes, but let me tell you something. That thing I just mentioned right now, if you really want to tukale, is more political than religious. It was a political move by Ife elders, but I'm not going to go into it. It was a pure political move, and they were smart. It was a political move. They had to create a different identity, and they did it for a reason. And if you understand the history of Ife, you know exactly why they did it, and it was brilliant. They are the ones I want ni ìfẹsẹ̀ pé èèyàn ló ń dún lábẹ́ ọ̀rọ̀ tó rò fi ń ké. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, by the way. I hope you get the point. So I hear people say things like, "Oh, that thing is for Kinikon, is for." I remember when they were having this thing with Tokpa Labi, I was like, when Mama Bolare came around and said, "Baba kú iṣẹ́ o Baba, Ọlọ́run ayérayé, ọmọ aládé wúrà, Ògbénu Oúnjẹ Ṣọlá, Àjàkárí ayé," that thing she's saying, to explain that in English language is WAEC, Abi JAMB, Abi SAT. What is she doing in there when he says Omitin Lole? Ọlọ́run ayérayé, ọmọ aládé. She's using theology and Yoruba linguistics, Yoruba language. Our understanding of the language, Àpáta ayérayé, ọmọ aládé wúrà, those things are actually from the description of Christ in the Bible. But even you as a Yoruba person, when you hear it, it sounds different from the Rock of Ages. That's what Àpáta ayérayé mean. Rock of Ages, Àpáta ayérayé. To be honest, it sounds deeper to me. There's a song, Ọlọ́run tó dá àwọn òkè ìgbàanì. Òkè ìgbàanì, ó deep gan. It's language, essentially. I think I stayed too long on this thing. Let's go on. What got us to this point? We're talking about syncretism. We're going to talk about syncretism much later, but I'm just trying to say, let me give an example from this book. Adejumo observes that the written culture was alien to the Yoruba before the arrival of the missionaries because norms and values of the society were transmitted through the use of various poetic forms like Ijala, Owe, Esakpipe, including song as well as oral narratives like folk tales, myths, and legends. However, early Christian missionaries used both the oral and literary presentations in their liturgy. They also began to teach writing and reading for meditation and private study of the Bible. I'm going somewhere. Okay. The European missionaries who were bred on the culture of the written word saw a need to spread literacy in order to facilitate what they perceived as the true worship of the Almighty. This resulted in some form of tension in the early Yoruba church, as the Yoruba converts, who had developed tremendous innate skill for extemporaneous expression of the greatness of God, found themselves caged, restricted to specific pages of a book. Excuse me, what does this mean? We didn't have to read or write, but we could extemporaneously talk about the greatness of God. We can talk about greatness of anything. Maybe Oriki, Esakpipe, Ijala. These are art forms. And we also have to get to a point as Yoruba people, regardless of your religion, you've got to see these things as art forms. If you don't, we are in trouble. If you're a Christian and you don't see it as an art form, we are in trouble. If you're a Muslim, you don't see it as an art form, we are in trouble. If you're a traditional worshiper and you don't see it as an art form, we are in trouble. It means anytime you hear a person, Tosun Jala, you will assume that person is doing something for one deity or the other. It is an art form. We are not. We have a concept that people celebrate, but it's a very, very dangerous concept that Africans are very spiritual. You think it is a compliment. It's a backhanded compliment where they reduce everything you do to spiritual. I'm not saying there's nothing spiritual. Don't get me wrong. There's something spiritual in things that we do. Life is spiritual, yes. But when they are having poetry, we have Ewi. But if I start, remember I say Kewi, and you say ma Kewi because what you have done is to reduce our opportunity to have another Wole Soyinka. What did Soyinka do, really? Think about it. If you have read his books, just think, what did Soyinka do? Soyinka literally speaks English language, speaks Yoruba using English language. Wole Soyinka speaks Yoruba. I wish I could remember what my mentor said about a gentleman who won the NLNJ prize. I mean, known him for a while. Because there's a way the person put it. Essentially, what they're saying basically is that the person is saying deep stuff. Okay, let me put it this way. It's Yoruba thoughts wrapped with English words. That's my own way of saying it. Yoruba thoughts wrapped in English words. Let me give you an example. If I say to you now that I spoke to my legs. I saw the fire burning across the street and I spoke to my legs. What does that mean in English language? Or I had a conversation with my legs. I saw the fire burning across the street and I had a conversation with my legs, or I spoke to my legs. What does that mean? That means nothing in English language. The English person is now asking me, what are you saying? Is Yoruba. It's only a person who is Yoruba that would understand what I said in English language, even though I'm using English language. Oh, I saw something happening. Let me give an example. Another example. Say you are misbehaving, and your parent calls you. Maybe you are in the midst of Europeans, and I call you and I say, you need to have a conference with your Aro and Odofin, or you need to have a council meeting with your Aro and Odofin. I could use the word with the chiefs in your mind or whatever. I'm just using it as an example. That would mean nothing to the British or to the American. But I just spoke English language. But it's not English, it's Yoruba. The idea basically is that the person is able to flex because of the understanding of their own native language and native art forms, whether it's in Owe. Is a saying. Alright? And Owe come out about Chupale. So when it comes to Esa, for instance, or it becomes our own way of transmitting ideas. It doesn't have to be religious. So here's the issue: the Christian missionaries came and said, you know what, you guys have to learn to read in order to be able to understand this depth of Kinikom. Like I can tell you these things offhand. So that's what she called a tension between the converts and the missionaries. Like, why do we have to study in order to worship God? In other words, if I want to worship God now, I have to read the book of Psalm, maybe Psalm 1. So if I don't have that book now, I mean money. No, I should be able to know it off heart. Which is why which is why maybe when we come on Wednesday, I'd like to read to you about people in Ekiti, for instance, who spend time memorizing. There's a particular person who spent time memorizing the book of Matthew, including people like Moise Oromolade. Oromolade was never educated, but he could quote the Bible copiously, but he was not literate. He was an illiterate man, but he knew the Bible. How did they do that thing? We'll talk about that on Wednesday. But let's quickly finish this part. Peel observes that the Yoruba saw Christianity as a religion of the book, and so Christians were most commonly described as Onibuku, book people. The main books that made Yoruba Christian Onibuku were the Bible and the Yoruba Reading Primer, known as Iwe Abidi, the Book of ABC. Interestingly, this primer contained religious materials as the main text for written exercises. Furthermore, early Christian missionaries to Yorubaland were suspicious of anything even remotely associated with Yoruba indigenous religion. They gave no room to distinguishing the content and the form. In other words, it's not about what you are saying, it's about the fact that you are using that art form, just that medium. They gave no room to distinguishing the content and the form, thereby avoiding any worship modes employed in indigenous Yoruba religion, including songs, musical instruments, dance, and Yoruba verbal art of eulogy. Baba Kuishe Baba would not be accepted. This or acceptable at the time. This resulted in the heightening of the tension already created by the inordinate elevation of literacy. To be a Yoruba Christian, one not only had to learn to read and write, but also was prevented from using traditional songs, musical instruments, and dance. To make matters worse, the use of such verbal arts as Esa, which is the praise form of Egungun, Ijala, the praise form of patron hunters, Iyere Ifa, praise song to Orunmila, as well as Orisha Pipe, the praise songs to the other Orisha, where the Yoruba had already perfected use, was declared anathema. This in turn made the early converts to get stuck in an identity crisis, which according to Falola showed the acceptance of themselves through foreign dressing and language and despising African religion. It got so bad that the new was almost swallowing up the old, tilting towards a total displacement of African culture. The African converts themselves blatantly aided the missionaries, who termed many aspects of African culture as inferior and barbaric. Before the very eyes of these converts were images and shrines of Orisha destroyed, and many songs and dances tagged as primitive. These African Christians thus became double-edged crusaders of a new culture and despisers of the old. These and other cultural collisions led to a period of protest. A few who found bearable. The few is talking about here were also Yoruba Christians, and this is what they did. This was expressed in what is termed cultural nationalism. Between the late 1880s and the First World War that aimed at righting Christianity. Excuse me, please. Excuse me. This was expressed in what is termed cultural nationalism, a movement between the late 1880s and the First World War that aimed at writing Christianity into Yoruba culture and history. Let me explain something. When people have these conversations about, oh, Christianity, Yoruba, they seem to start, oh, they hated Christianity, they burnt stuff down. By the way, the traditional worshippers have also burnt Christian stuff before. This is not to say it's better than, I'm just saying that is how you find this thing across history. Is to tell you that there has to be a resolution of that crisis beyond stops at confrontation. Then we'll say, why should I be a Christian? These people hate my culture. They say Christianity hates culture. Yoruba culture is nonsense. It has to be only Christianity. That means I'm a true Yoruba person. I cannot become a Christian. Story stopped. And that's why I see people discussing Yoruba, because for the most part, people are picking things that they thought happened, not what really happened. Did people destroy shrines? Yes. No. There were Christians who were Yoruba who began to ask questions. Let me also say something. One of the things I've noticed, especially in the last 10 years, is there are a lot of people asking questions, but there are very few people getting answers. And the craziest thing I've noticed on social media is people celebrate those who ask questions. I mean, number one, is bad if you don't ask questions, by the way. You should question things. But if you think questioning a thing, as a matter of fact, they don't even celebrate those who ask questions, they celebrate those who criticize, and I'll explain why. A person who has questions about a thing, they don't have answers. So the next thing they begin to do is they begin to criticize that thing. But they've never resolved the issue. They don't know the answer to the question they've been asking. So whenever they talk about that faith or that concept or whatever it is, they're coming from a place of non-resolution. They've not resolved they have no answers to the questions, and they are celebrated because they can criticize, not because they have answers to the question, which is stupid. Number one, some people don't ask questions at all. That's not good, especially if you're a person of faith. You should question everything, but you must get answers. If you have no answers, then you wait until you get it. If you rush out without the answers, you're going to become a critic. And most critics know nothing. They can criticize it, but they don't understand it. In other words, even if you don't want to do that thing again, let me give an example. I'm a Christian, but there's an appreciation I have for Orunmila personally, and I'm not an Ifa devotee. I don't do traditional religion. That's not me. I'm a Christian, 100%. But I have an appreciation for the Yoruba philosophy as contained in the words of Orunmila. That appreciation is coming from understanding. Without understanding it, I will only criticize it and then fight everybody that's an adherent of that faith. And then I'll now become champion amongst my fellow ignoramuses. That's what is happening in different conversations, whether it's in politics, in religion. I see it every day and I laugh because it's like everybody just the truth of the matter is that many of the questions we have are not new, and that's the beauty of it. And in a way, it's calming. In a way, it's reassuring. In a way, you discover that you are not the only one who is going through this. Let me tell you something. All of us have to be humble. There's no question you have that nobody has asked before. And I say that I've not found a question that anybody has asked that nobody has asked before. It was Solomon who said there's nothing new under the sun. If anything is new to you under the sun, it's because you are new under the sun. Somebody has asked that question. So we'll find that answer. And in our journey of looking for answers, we don't necessarily attack. And even if you attack, by the time you find the answer, if you are a really humble person, you discover that just be like, necessary. Because if both of us discuss this thing, most likely it's easy for us to understand where we are coming from. So I'll read what you're writing on YouTube. The point I'm trying to make with all this is that there were Christians. It was called iconoclasts, right? They would go after things and again, the Bible talks about zeal without knowledge. Like you have zeal, and sometimes it's with boldness, just want to destroy stuff and say and break ties, and I'm not doing again. Some Christians now began to ask questions beyond the religious. Is that we are losing our culture in the name of becoming Christians. They now began something called cultural activism. This was in the 1880s. That's why I tell people we've got to be humble. Why? Because what is shaking because we don't have to go through the mistakes they went through. It says these and other cultural collisions led to a period of protest by a few who found the tension unbearable. This was expressed in what is termed cultural nationalism, a movement between the late 1880s and the First World War that aimed at writing Christianity into Yoruba culture and history. This is from JDYP, by the way. JDYP says this term first occurred in J.F. Adeajayi's seminal article of 1961, 19th Century Origins of Nigerian Nationalism. Actually, I was going to read this book today, but we cannot read that book until we have read some other books. It's not even a book, it's a paper. It's an article in a journal, but it's a fantastic piece. But we'll read it together. 19th Century Origins of Nigerian Nationalism. In other words, what we call Nigerian nationalism today started because Yoruba Christians sought to assert their cultural identity without jettisoning their Christianity. That movement eventually led to what we want independence. It came from Yoruba people, Esa. We don't have to stop Ijala. We can be Christians. We can play drums. Someone said the cycle is back. Some of the new Pentecostal leaders are back at it. Hayadeji on TikTok says the cycle is back. Some of the new Pentecostal leaders are back at it. Some of us are now back at it too. Some of us too will now speak up as folks who understand faith and culture. And that's why I don't like in your conscience. Anybody can do whatever they like, but here Yoruba identity, nothing is shaking that one. You hold on to it. If you like, be Christian, be Muslim, be traditional worshipper. Don't even believe in anything. They might believe in Kokan. It's okay, but that Yoruba thing, we hold on to that. My battlefield, not necessarily. So that one, that's the line. So they did not go all the way into mixing Christianity with traditional worship. They did not do that. They just took the culture. So festivals, they will attend festivals. They will attend festivals, Yoruba festivals, which should not be a problem, to be honest. It's just that it's just that on the other hand, you also have the idea where the Odun is almost 100% religious. And if you start doing that, then you are syncretizing. There's a thin line. When we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. I'll explain later. Well, let's read a few more things here. You said, but the Catholic did. Yeah, the Catholic did. What the Catholic did, I don't want to criticize Catholicism, but you must understand that there was a reason for the Protestant Reformation, and there was a reason for the counter-reformation by Catholicism itself. Syncretism is not good. You will be neither here nor there. You have crowd though. As people are doing Chrislam now. Have you seen people doing Chrislam in Lagos? Chatibo Chrislam. You can't tell what I'm reading on TikTok. Ọ̀tọ̀ ní kọ́kọ́ Allahu Akbar, ọ̀tọ̀ ní kọ́kọ́ pé wọ́n kàn máa orin kìíní wọ́n kàn yí padà ní. Chrislam is a dangerous thing. It's going to confuse people. That's syncretism. Please let's power tap on TikTok. I enjoy being here, but it's 9 o'clock already. There's Chrislam Hub too. That's the issue. I don't believe in syncretism. I think it's confusing. The person who is even doing this is confused. Know your faith, but don't jettison your culture. And I mentioned the other day that every time we have, I mean, in Yorubaland, we do these weddings where we will say, we'll do church wedding, we'll do traditional marriage that erroneously we call that engagement. That's actually traditional. If you do that traditional wedding alone, you are married. If you do that engagement, you are married. But we'll do court, then we'll say we want to do white wedding. And we say white wedding is the one that God will bless. That's nonsense. White wedding is literally European traditional wedding. So the mindset that makes you say, you know what, I'm going to get married in the name of Jesus. Whatever. That's it. So it's about cultural practices, not religious practices. Because it's important to also make these things. I'm not saying that a Christian cannot do anything because we are once it's start going spiritual, that thin line, we'll get to that when the time comes. But again, the conversation is about culture. Philosophy. So we're going to start from this book next time, but let me just read a few things here. It says in the book, The 19th Century Origins of Nigerian Nationalism, where Ajayi argues that the movement itself, that's the movement on Nigerian nationalism, I want Herbert Macaulay. The movement itself had its roots in the missionary movement. It is the aspiration for cultural independence felt by people under foreign cultural domination. It was a protest against discrimination and social exclusion, as well as to the disparagement of their culture and collective achievement. E.g., if you reduce, and this is very personal to me, if you reduce Oduduwa, Ogun, Oromiyan to Kalobon, you have weakened that thing in Yoruba consciousness. Why? Those are the representations, they could be representations of worship or of veneration for some people, and it's okay. But they're actually representation of Yoruba achievement. So you see, the mistake is from both sides. One side says, it's Yoruba, don't touch it, it's demonic. The other part says, it's Yoruba, is religious, is mysterious. The Christian is like, I better not go there. It's kuku mysterious. In reality, the idea of paying obeisance, so to speak, to the doer, again, I speak as me, is how, and this yesterday, I know I'm going somewhere. I want to say something before, because what I want to say, only you back on. Yesterday, my family, we were sitting down, and I saw this news where they said the ruling family, Tony Obakon Ijebu, they sent a message to Kwamwon. He had written them a letter that he was interested in the position of Awujale. So they sent him a message that he should respond with his genealogy, so to speak, 7 generations. So I called my children. I told them that, okay, now I want you guys to tell me our generations. Of course, you have to do more than 7. And it's easier, by the way, it's easier for me to be able to do more than that because of the kind of family. Real families usually have this chronology thing. So when I started doing counting, there was a way my children's faces light up. My wife was looking at them, she was like, there is without giving too much away, the idea basically is that you see where you're coming from, and you also appreciate the achievements of your forebears. In other words, when I look through my family tree, I see city builders, statesmen, innovators, warriors, herbalists, aka pharmacists, you see all these things and then it inspires you. But if you don't connect that thing, if you just stop it at the reason you're calling them is because you can be able to, and it's like this for me because some of the people that are in my family tree, they are deities in Yorubaland. At least 3 of them are deities in Yorubaland, and I respect those who do that because that's how they want to interact with them. But you see, you don't learn from gods, you don't learn from deities, you venerate Oman Bo Rishani. Abi? Shemogba. Oman Bo Rishani. One joke like berry Rishako Korisha coming kaka. Oman Bo ni. And if you limit them to Bibo, you have reduced what they actually stands for. E.g., imagine that we have a shrine dedicated. I mean, if I always say that if this was in the 14th century or 15th century, there'll be shrines dedicated to all over the place. You know, there's a huge possibility we'll not be discussing his philosophy. We'll be talking about. We'll just be there, and then we'll ask him for things. We'll make requests. Is that not what we do? Again, this is not a critique. This is an observation for all of us, regardless of your faith. Is that not what we do? So we go to him. Meanwhile, Baba Lobo, by the way, but all the bards and musicians of those days, they used to call him Baba Awolowo, Baba Alayinka. Now, I say Awolowo, Baba Alayinka, Sheba for me. That is it. Why? Because it's a deity. But what we don't realize is this: every deity, this is from Ifa. What I'm about to say right now is literally from Ifa. And if anybody questions about, I'll promise you I'll go and bring the book and I'll read it out. I don't have all the things in my head. I wish I had memorized all the SFA, but I know where to go now. Just bring it out and read it. Our deities, quote unquote, all of them were heroes. You know what? I think it's important for me to read that thing because it's not fair that I'll just say that without reading it. Again, I can't. I'm going to have to bring a book. Do you mind? We're rounding up. We're going to continue from here. We're rounding up gradually. I hope you guys don't mind. I want to get up and bring a book. I want to read something to you about where our deities come from and the way we can reclaim this thing as Yoruba people, regardless of religious persuasion. Give me a second, please. Thank you very much for staying tuned. I'll read something to you. Shebilo Waja. Okay. So I have a number of books on Ifa. So anytime I want to quote them, mind that is wa on. Somebody wrote something about 5 generations earlier. What did you say? He said, I try to do it alone. When I see that news, I can only do 5. So it's now on my to-do list. Mr. Felix, please do it if you can. For me, I think I got interested in doing it when I was 8 or 9 years old. So I finally finished. Show you can take a car. My car. Let me do something better. Okay, so I could read it, but I think instead of reading it, let me do something better. Let me have you listen to. Umbo, I think it's here. Sorry guys, I want to find it. So I have the books now. I'm looking for the page. Umbo. I could say it, but I think it's better if I read it. Me fair, I don't want to make any mistakes. Only Ifani on Indori. That's the premise of what I'm about to say. And those who know it already know what I'm about to say. But it's important to actually... I think one of the things I have to do now is to remember... every word. Is to... How okay, so... But give me a ball. When you saw these things, you begin to understand why... it takes 8 to 9 years for people to be in the school. Why am I hanging like this? Hello. Oh, can you do me? Can you do me? Do me. Which one is our Solomon doing? Please, can you hear? I don't know. For some reason, the network is misbehaving. I don't know why. Mbo, my ring got more once in Mbo. If me should come up, Shank bo Misha. We'll call Lenny. I wrote it down. It's in this book. What's happening to the network now? I found it. Please, can you hear me? Because even me, I'm not seeing myself again now. Motif freeze. Orumila, oh God. I found the page I'm looking for now. I'm frozen. Can you see me? I'm frozen, Abi. Okay, you can hear me, but you can't see me. Ah, okay. Okay, máa ka kíní ìgbà yẹn bóyá máa padà wá sí ni àbí kí n jáde kí n. You can hear me, but I'm frozen. Ọlọ́mọdé I freeze you. Okay, I'm back now. Are we good? Are we good? Okay, let me read to you. I found it. I think we're good, right? You can hear me? Perfect. Okay, ẹ ṣé. Ọ̀rúnmìlà wí èèyàn ní dòrìṣà. Èmi náà wí èèyàn ní dòrìṣà. Bàbára àgbọnnìrègún. Ó ní ògùn tẹ́ ẹ rí òun. Ó léèyàn ni. Nígbà tó gbọ́n tó lágbára, òun ni wọ́n fi ń bọ́ ọ́. Ó ní Ṣàngó tẹ́ ẹ rí òun. Ó ní èèyàn ni. Nígbà tó gbọ́n tó lágbára ni wọ́n fi ń bọ́ ọ́. Ẹni tó gbọ́n ni wọ́n ń bọ, èèyàn ní dòrìṣà. I don't know if you heard that, because the point I was making is the fact that our deities are heroes. Is there a difference between Irúnmọlẹ̀ and Òrìṣà? Yes. Big difference. But let's finish this one. I was saying that our deities are heroes. And the deification of them is what makes us, Bowo. The acknowledgement of their humanity does not reduce their quote-unquote divinity. That's a lesson that we have to learn as Yoruba people. For instance, you can look at Awo. For me, I think Awo is not just a human. I see him as somebody worthy of respect and honor. But I also know he was human. So I'm able to read his books. I'm able to study him. I'm able to learn from him. If you put him only in the category of deity, you will not learn anything from him. Do you understand? So I'm going to say it again. Ọ̀rúnmìlà wí èèyàn ní dòrìṣà. Èmi náà wí èèyàn ní dòrìṣà bára àgbọnnìrègún. Ó ní ògùn tẹ́ ẹ rí òun, ó léèyàn ni. Nígbà tó gbọ́n tó lágbára, òun ni wọ́n fi ń bọ́. Ó ní Ṣàngó tẹ́ ẹ rí òun, ó ní èèyàn ni. Nígbà tó gbọ́n tó lágbára ni wọ́n fi ń bọ́. Ẹni tó gbọ́n ni wọ́n ń bọ, èèyàn ní dòrìṣà. In other words, it is true that ó ti dòrìṣà. Bọ̀ ẹ̀kọ́ wà tó lè kọ́, but you cannot kọ́ ẹ̀kọ́ lára òrìṣà, but lè kọ́ ẹ̀kọ́ lára èèyàn. For instance, if you see Ògún as òrìṣà, wàá bọ́, and that's okay. But if you understand the fact that Ògún is not just an òrìṣà, or try and understand what made him an òrìṣà. And the answer is actually quite interesting. What made him an òrìṣà is the fact that ìgbà tó gbọ́n, Ọ̀rúnmìlà ní nígbà tó gbọ́n, ó ní ògùn tẹ́ ẹ rí òun, èèyàn ni. Nígbà tó gbọ́n tó lágbára, òun ni wọ́n fi ń bọ́. Ọgbọ́n wo, agbára wo ló ní tí wọ́n fi ń bọ́? That's why last week I was saying something. It sounded like a joke when I said people want to depict war in Yoruba, in ancient Yoruba land, and you are seeing them saying, I mean, I'm not saying that did not happen, but if you really think that's how they waged war, then you don't really know what made him popular. War was one of those things, but the primary thing was innovation. He was into tech. He created technologies that allowed people to come like say, this guy is too much. This guy is great. They had to see him in another light. But the point is, if the conversation you have with that persona is just of Bibo, You cannot get anything that has to do with technology from him. Even from a place of even from the Bible side concept. To bá bọ́, in fact, tó bá ti jẹ́ pé tó ń bọ Ògún gan, tó kàn ń bọ́ kò kàn fẹ́ bọ́ lásán ni, ó kàn bọ́ náà nìyẹn. Ṣùgbọ́n, I don't want to go into the spiritual. Let me tell you something. In the spirit realm, all truths are parallel. If a person channels Ògún, and the Baba àwọn àgbàlagbà àwọn ọmọ kan tí mo sọ àwọn àgbàlagbà ló lè kọ́ wa dáadáa. Ní ṣe àgbàlagbà pé àdàgbà orí lóyún age, I'm saying àgbàlagbà lógún. It's not even àgbàlagbà like just because you're àgbàlagbà. I'm saying the people in that space, in that Ògún space, can change that energy to create implements, to create tools. Is that you're doing that, or you're just worshiping? What does that mean? If, for instance, I'm a Christian and someone tells me, listen, you have somebody in your lineage or someone in Yorubaland, one of your ancestors, who did this and did that and created this from iron. I was able to create this about 1,000 years ago. What does that do to you as a person, regardless of your religion? The conversation at that moment is about science and technology. And the fact that somebody in your lineage, somebody in your space have done it before. That is how we can grow as Yoruba people. And someone is saying, just like colonization, exactly what they did. And I'm trying not to even go to colonization yet, because that's the spiritualization of it. So, for instance, in Catholicism, I'm thinking too fast. In Catholicism, there's something called beatification. A person does miraculous works, so they beatify that person. So the person becomes a saint. What if I tell you right now that many of our deities are also patron saints, e.g. Olokun. Olokun is not a patron saint. I mean, she was a woman apparently, but she became a saint, or I'm using the word saint loosely, by the way, or Orisha. There's a reason she became Orisha, and it wasn't, and I'm not saying there's nothing spiritual about it, by the way, in case if you are into that spiritual part, but I'm saying that it's not that. I mean, it's not just that. She was a fantastic businesswoman. That was what qualified her. She was a fantastic businesswoman, and she was the lead person in terms of the trade, the bead trade, Segi and Iyun. She was the major person. She made a lot of money. She was an international businesswoman in the 11th century. She was big, and she was in that trade. And when she passed, not only do they name an Orisha for her, the space where they make glass beads today is called Igbo Olokun. I'm from Ife, it's in Ife. Igbo Olokun is not Olokun that created that place. It was named for her. That was the industrial site where they created the glass beads. The name is like, oh God. Some of these things makes you want to cry. Some of these things, they make you want to cry. It's like University of Ife is so attached to Awolowo that when Awolowo died, they started calling the school Obafemi Awolowo University. That's the same thing. Obafemi Awolowo University. We named the school after him because he was very involved in the creation of the school, or in the growth, the vision behind it. That's the word, the vision behind the school. And so when he passed, we said, no, let's not just call it University of Ife, let's call it Obafemi Awolowo University. It's the same thing with Igbo Olokun. It was named for her. On one hand, there's the beatification or the deification of the person, Towambo. The Christian missionaries see that and say, that's a demonic spirit. The Yoruba people see that and say, that's the only thing we are doing here. I'm born. As a Christian missionary, both of them are wrong. Because whilst, yes, you may worship that being, there's something more that she represents. She represents trade. She represents international trade. She represents commerce. She represents tech. She represents metallurgy. That will make you extract glass out of sand is not worship. That's science. Whatever will make you convert those glass beads into the glass into beads, that's science. Whatever makes you convert that bead into money, that's commerce. Is it a lesson that everybody will learn from that thing, regardless of their faith? Plenty lessons. So what should we be doing? That's what we should be doing. If you want to worship that thing, that's your business. Go and do it. It's good. Nobody, good or bad, that's not my business. You want to worship Jesus, worship Jesus. But when we want to have a conversation about trade in Yorubaland, and I say I want to begin my lecture from a businesswoman that lived and did well internationally 1,000 years ago, you should not feel like it's a lie. It's a lie. When did Nigeria even start? That's why I say Nigeria history reduces who we are as a people. And I'm not making any of these things up. Let me just give you sources. Read the history of the Yoruba people by Stephen Banji Akintoye. Read Yoruba, the New History by Akinwumi Ogundiran. Start with those two books. There are many more. We have to be able to disabuse our minds from either demonizing everything or spiritualizing everything. Because we are losing too much on both sides. I'm just going to wrap up with this paragraph and then we can move on. I like that thing I read though. I have to memorize it. If I wí èèyàn ní dòrìṣà, èmi náà wí èèyàn ní dòrìṣà, ọ̀rọ̀ mi làbára àgbọ̀n mi rẹ̀gùn. Ó ní ògùn tó rí hùn èèyàn ní. Nígbà tó lọ́gbọ́n tó lágbára òun ló dòrìṣà. Mo ti ń try, mo ti mọ láyìn bíi mẹ́rin báyìí. Oríṣi ògùn tó rí hùn èèyàn ní. Nígbà tó gbọ́n tó lágbára ló dòrìṣà ni wọ́n fi ń bọ́. Ẹni tó gbọ́n ni wọ́n ń bọ, èèyàn ní dòrìṣà. Anybody tells me now if Obafemi Awolowo is not Orisha, of course he is. There's nobody in the history of Yorubaland that unified Yoruba people after Oduduwa more than Awolowo. None. I said it. And it's not even me. Anybody that studied Yoruba essay knows that. Of course it's Orisha. But it's also a person that we can sit down and say, okay, kí ni political philosophy Awolowo? Rárá, a gbọ́dọ̀ sọ o. A kàn fẹ́ lọ bọ bàbá nkẹ́nẹ́ ni. Nǹkan tá à ń ṣe pẹ̀lú àwọn òrìṣà nìyẹn. A fẹ́ sọ ọkàn pa political ideology Awolowo. Federalism báwo? No, a kàn fẹ́ lọ bọ bàbá. A máa sọ fún bàbá pé politics Nigeria ti ń dàrú o. Àwò kọ́ wa bá ṣe máa ṣe o. Òrìṣà òṣèlú, thank you. Kọ́ wa bá ṣe máa ṣe o. Wọ́n ti ń gbà kí n lọ́wọ́ wa o. Wọ́n rẹ́ wa jẹ o. Jà fún wa o. Kọ́tà máa máa ṣe nìyẹn. But on one hand, I can place him that high, and I still do, by the way. I think he's the most important person in African politics, in politics, period. I know the funny thing about that man himself. If you go to his place in Kenya, you see the picture of Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, Bose. These are Indian nationalists that he looked up to, but he learned from them. So we must go beyond. And I know when I use Awolowo now, it's going to sound very stupid. Like, why would you say, Baba, instead of you to sit down and study his works? That's also what we do with those Orisha. We've not studied them, and we should, so we don't lose what they really did that made them what they became. Let's finish this paragraph and then we'll start from here next time. It is the aspiration for cultural independence felt by people under foreign culture domination. Go back a bit. According to Peel, this term, that's cultural nationalism, this term first occurred in J.F. Adeajayi's seminal article of 1961, 19th Century Origins of Nigerian Nationalism. Before we finish this series, I promise I'm going to read that article. When Ajayi argues that the movement itself had its roots in the missionary movement, it is the aspiration for cultural independence felt by people under foreign cultural domination. It was a protest against discrimination and social exclusion, as well as with the disparagement of their culture and collective achievement. The nationalists began deliberate actions to reassert their dignity as a nation by a new insistence on the worth of what was distinctive of them. This cultural nationalism was expressed in the reversion to the use of traditional Yoruba clothing, names, songs, musical instruments, and dance. They collected the ancestral wisdom of the communities in the form of stories and poetry, such as proverbs, compiled historical narratives from oral traditions, and even started to find merit in some aspects of traditional religion. This found fullest expression in the emergence of independent churches founded by Africans in protest against some feature of the brand of Christianity introduced by the missionary societies. This was what led them to study Ifa. People like E.M. Lijadu, people like Bolaji Dowu, people like Reverend Adegbola. These were the three names I just mentioned right now. They're reverends, and their books on Ifa, I have them, and they will humble you. You put those books, and I don't speak as somebody who has studied everything. All of us are still learning, but from the one that we have learned so far, if you put, by the way, these are those books. Ifa is the first. I think Ifa is first one. The second one is Orunmila. They were translated into English by Wade and Bibola. Sorry, by Wade and Bibola is in the 70s. I'm talking about. I'm going to. Okay, Wade and Bibola is also. I want to mention the Christians first. So the question is about what Christians did. Wade and Bibola is Babalawo, so naturally it makes sense that they would do that. But when you hear people like E.M. Lijadu even did his work in 1920, 21, 22. These were Christians. What are the names of the books? Okay, so E.M. Lijadu did Ifa, then he did Orunmila. Those two books have been translated into English by Abosede Emmanuel, so you can find them. You can also reach out to Redomi to be able, if you want to get those books. There is William Bascom is American, so that one doesn't count. I'm talking about the Christians that did this. I'm thinking then much later you had Olodumare God in Yoruba Belief by Bolaji Dowu, and then African Traditional Religion by Bolaji Dowu, who is also a reverend like Lijadu. And then you have the thesis that Dr. Adegbola wrote in the 70s, Ifa and Christianity. If you put all these things beside William Bascom's book or Professor Wande Abimbola's book, whether it's Awonjo Merindilogun or Ifa Literary Corpus or Babelebuibon, you see that what those priests, all those Christian priests did is not trying to Christianize the faith. It was to explain it as it is, because when you compare it to what Babelebuibon has written or Baba Wande Abimbola has written, it's the same thing. No Avestas Bawo, no Avestas Bolaji Dowu. He's young now. I'm talking about books that are written in the 70s. This Bolaji Dowu is a younger person. Baba Bolaji Dowu was a Methodist priest. These were people that lectured in UI. Dr. Adegbola was Emmanuel College of Theology in Ibadan. They decided to take their names back. They were changing their names to Yoruba names. We'll go into the details much later. Changing their names into Yoruba names, began to wear buba and shoro, all in a way to tell the British that, listen, Jesu yi ajoni ni ṣùgbọ́n bemi se fe emi Yoruba le mi. Tó bá wẹ̀, o lè dé time ọ̀run ní òru inú oòrùn. Bo agbádá yẹn máa wọ̀ ntèmi. It was a form of protest against cultural domination. All of this to say that if a cultural ideology works, it works regardless of where it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to dispossess you of your uniqueness. E.g., if all the Christians of the world gather somewhere, they must be able to point me out. There has to be something that makes me stand out. Even the Bible says in the book of Revelation that all tribes and tongues will gather. In other words, it's not like you're going to be detribalized because you're a Christian. You're supposed to be who you are, but we all meet. That's the idea of Christianity, not the idea of losing yourself because we are all children of God. No, you still be you, but you don't have to be English. You don't have to be British. And that's where cultural nationalism started in Nigeria. It started in the church. It started with Yoruba Christians in the 1880s. And then the politics of the CMS also got in the way, especially when it came to Ajayi Crowther and how some things played out. He passed on in the 1890s. However, I think around 1890 thereabout. He passed on in the 19th century, before the end of the 19th century. But all the cultural activism eventually led to the founding of the African Church in 1901, and then other things came much later. But we'll get into some of these things, and I hope you get the point of all of this stuff. Like, whatever you whatever you ascribe to, be Yoruba. That's the important thing. One. Number two, so if whatever your faith, I'm a Christian, whatever your faith, be Yoruba. Be Yoruba. Be Yoruba. It's even what makes you different when you go out in the world and you speak English. You could speak English, right? You're very intelligible, but you say certain things and they're like, Yoruba non boy. You got to fún bàbá wọlé ṣe nǹkan nǹkan tó ní ẹ máa fi Yorùbá yẹn sí, but òyìnbó lẹ́yìn sọ ṣùgbọ́n Yorùbá lẹ́yìn sọ ó yẹ it's English, it's Yoruba thoughts wrapped with English words. That's one. Number two, we must intentionally avoid extremes, or the idea of reducing, and I use the word, respectfully, everything that has to do with our heroes to mysticism and spirituality. And let me tell you the saddest part of this thing. Some people have conducted researches into this thing. So I've seen it. I watched an interview last week and I hated it, and I was actually shameful. Some of the people that hold on to the mysterious part of it, I challenge you. Question them. Don't criticize them. Don't fight them. Don't just ask questions about that thing. For the most part, we are using mysticism to hide our ignorance, and it's not fine. It's not nice. Once I tell you that, so we have to be intentional. We have to take back what is ours, but it doesn't mean that you have to stop being whatever you are in terms of your faith. That's that for today. It's 9:40. I can't believe it, but here we are. It's 20 minutes to 10. Gotta go. Thank you very much for being here. We'll be here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time, and we're going to have a great session. We'll be listening to a recording that I think will also help us in understanding of these things. That will be tomorrow at 4 p.m. I didn't put up our account details earlier, but I'm going to do that now. If you'd like to support what we're doing, by the way, let me thank everybody who has given gifts. Thank you very much for your support and for your generosity. If you like to, excuse me, oh boy, I think we're going to be on this for a while, man, because this is something. Okay, you know what? Let me do what I usually do. I see people writing things in the comment section, so I'm just going to read so that although you can't come up because of time, I can quickly read what you are writing. But if you'd like to support us, please use the bank details that will be showing on your screen in a bit. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so some things I'm seeing in the comment section. It says, someone said, you made so much sense. We worship Jesus and we also know his deeds. Mahatma Gandhi was Hindi. Some of his inspiration actually came from Jesus. He said it. And he referenced specifically the Sermon on the Mount. and Sherawagon on all sides. And I know we do this and we look for somebody to blame. It's never blaming. We are the ones that we need to blame. We need to blame ourselves. We should be higher than this. I'm trying to stop myself. I could cry. I could cry because how can we lose so much? And for what? For what? Can you deep gone? If you meet any Christian, you ask them about the faith, and the person starting oh deep, wow, can you deep gone? Once you mystify something, I mean, I know the part where, there's a part, of course, where people also say everything is demonic. And if you're a Pentecostal, and you've ever eaten in a Chinese restaurant, if you're a Christian, and you're ever eaten in a Chinese restaurant, and you had no problem with those images, why do you think every image or sculpture that is ours is demonic? If you're a traditional worshipper and you've ever eaten in Chinese restaurants, why do you think that every sculpture is spiritual? I'm not saying there's nothing spiritual though. There's spiritual things. But we need to calm down and learn how to do these things so we can grow our space. Someone says, I think we should review some of these books by the Babas. Oh, I'll think about it. I took only one article last year. One article in a journal. One article written in 1977. Project on TikTok. Well, to be fair, that was then. Times have changed. I'll be able to manage it better now. People came. I'm like. But then I used to bring people up during the conversation, so they will come. But I want them to feel like it's not. But it just got to a point of like, listen, think about it for a second. Imagine having a lecture, like a summit, you're teaching. And everybody says, no, I don't agree. So everybody that doesn't agree, now give them a microphone to come and say what they want to say. Even though they don't agree, does not mean that they know better, or it's just that they don't agree. That's when I began to change. Yes, that's when I began to change the style of what we're doing. Not because of anything. When the time comes, we bring people up, but today we're not bringing anybody up. I know the funny thing, that's what you're talking about. It actually does not even celebrate Islam. It those Babas, those are ancient ones, were good. They were smart. What they were doing was critiquing Islam. They critiqued it. They stripped it of anything spiritual and began to question it. Let me give an example. Oh, time too low. Let me give an example. They said, this is from Ifa, by the way. They said, Iya Moleku Olóhun Ogbawe. Baba Moleku, I'm paraphrasing by the way, Olóhun Ogbawe. Ṣùgbọ́n ọdún wa dé sí, ṣùgbọ́n like suddenly lójijì Olóhun gbààwẹ̀ Ọlọ́run. Ṣé Ọlọ́run kú ni àkókò gbọ́ k'Ọlọ́run kú, something like that. The point is, they were saying that when Muslim's parents died, he did not fast. We, as Yoruba people, that would be an appropriate time to fast, to show that you're mourning. You know what, guys, please, when I read things like this, it's not fine. It's not good to just talk. Come on, because go and paraphrase. Somebody who's now see the video and say, "Is it like quote it as it is?" 1 second, please. Let me read. I'll read exactly what is inside. Ẹ máa gbọ́. Ìmọ̀lé ṣèké, ìmọ̀lé ṣọ̀dàlẹ̀, ìyá ìmọ̀lé kú, wọ́n ní àwọn kì í sọkún, bàbá ìmọ̀lé kú, wọ́n ní àwọn kì í gbààwẹ̀, wọ́n ní ẹni bá sọ kú òkú, iná Ọlọ́run á jó ẹni tí ó kú lára. Ẹni tó bá sọkún òkú, iná Ọlọ́run á jó ẹni tó kú lára. Ẹni bá sì gbààwẹ̀ òkú, olúwa rẹ̀ fún òkú ní àìsinmi lọ́run. Àṣẹ̀yìnwá àṣẹ̀yìnbọ̀, ọjọ́ èké ìmọ̀lé pé, wọ́n fi ebi panú ara wọn. A ní èéṣe, wọ́n ní àwọn ń gbààwẹ̀ Ọlọ́run. Ǹjẹ́ ìmọ̀lé ń gbààwẹ̀ o? Ẹnìkan kò gbọ́ ikú Ọlọ́run o. Ìmọ̀lé ń gbààwẹ̀. Ọlọ́run kì í kú, Èdùmàrè kì í rùn. Ẹnìkan kò gbọ́ ikú Ọlọ́run o. What does that sound like? That's a critique. In other words, you see the tension between the culture and Islamic religion. And when they say Ungbawi alone, they're talking about Ramadan. When your parents died, you say you should cry, you didn't cry. You say you should fast, you did not fast. Suddenly you are fasting for 30 days. Is it because God died? Who died in your family that are fasting for 30 days? It's a critique. So they say Ekeni Mole. They're not insulting him. They are saying they see it as hypocrisy from their own perspective as Yoruba people. I don't even read it, but they say it's not true, it did not happen. Like, okay. So maybe one day we'll do it, but that's actually that's an essay, but maybe one day we'll read some of those books. These are the things that you read sometimes, you just feel like Jesus is Lord. We are losing a lot, and we are doing it because of ourselves. May God help us. Lastly, whatever you are, remember you are Yoruba. Guard your Yorubaness, right? Guard your Yorubaness, and be inquisitive, but don't go around just calling people out because you think they are wrong. You need the books. Some of those books are. I have some books that is the last copy I bought. And also there's some things that come on, share my shower. But we'll see. Ekini Mike Paye. Opo nígbà tí wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ irùngbọ̀n ẹ̀, wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ irùngbọ̀n, wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ the concept of the miraculous from the Islamic perspective. The Yoruba priests were not just priests. I trained as a priest. Let me mention that, even though that slipped, but I've already said it. A priest is not just someone that just, tells you stuff. It's somebody who, in a way, has to do the work of a philosopher. You have to think about stuff. You have to observe. You have to describe. You have to explain. Zach can say, I'm not the far priest, though, but I'm saying that you have to be inquisitive, but you have to also resolve stuff. You have to ask questions. You also have to, and when you know stuff, you know it. When you don't know it, you don't know it, and you don't act like you do. You have to be open. That's why you wonder why some of us are the way we are, but we can do better, and Yorubaland will do better, right? And we'll be able to. What I'm saying basically is that what you study in philosophy class is what these babas were doing, just like that. And we are losing that because we're not acknowledging the genius in what they did. We've got to recapture that, and it doesn't have to do with religion. All right, thank you everyone for listening. We'll be here tomorrow, 4 p.m. if at time West African time, 4. We're going to talk about, I won't tell you now, it's something that has to do with this topic, but looking at things from specifically about the 500 years that Christianity has been in Yorubaland. We're going to listen to that again tomorrow, and then we'll go in deeper into cultural activism. And then after that, I want to begin to talk about what happened from town to town in terms of Christianity in Yorubaland, so you can appreciate what has happened, so we're not just thinking that, so they forced Christianity on us. That's not what happened, though. But may God help us, and may God help Yorubaland. May God help you, and may you prosper in all that you lay your hands upon. I think we need to repent because we have misspoken and judged people wrongly. It is well. All right. Eshio, thank you very much for being here. Again, if you'd like to support what we're doing, please use the bank details, GT Bank, 01618544103. We'll have a great session tomorrow, I can tell, because I did some work on that thing earlier today, and I think you're going to like it when it's time to go into to listen to it, and we'll discuss it as well. Wednesday, cultural activism. We're looking at the book by Professor J.F. Adeajayi, and also Aladurai Christian Movement in Yorubaland, something like that, by J.D.Y.P.L. Those two books, and some that are come to mind now. We'll do that on Wednesday. But tomorrow, please join us as early as possible, 4 p.m. It's not be very long, so please come early. All right, we're going to listen to our anthems before we go now, the Nigerian anthem and the Yoruba anthem. By the way, this class is supposed to be 4 to 8. This is almost 10. So, I see some comments on YouTube. It says tap the heart button if you like. Oh, thank you, Sheila Murutu. Your name is interesting, but thank you. Thank you. Oh, you have written a lot of stuff. Thank you. Someone said Awolowo was a man, it was man that deified him. Jesus Christ is still the Redeemer of all mankind. Yes. I was not comparing Awolowo to Jesus. I was comparing Awolowo with our deities. I'm very, very intentional with my examples. I wasn't comparing Awo and Jesus. Even Awo would not want anybody to compare him with Jesus. I was comparing Awo with our deities. But let's just play the anthem and go, because of the part of my Jasi me. All right, here's the Nigerian anthem. 1 second, let me change the audio source. All right, here's the Nigerian anthem. Sing along if you know. If you don't know, please learn. This is Nigerian anthem and then the Yoruba anthem. Take a listen.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians all are proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reign. In peace all battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hand unto our children a banner without stain. God of all creation, grant this our one request. Help
ìwọ ni àwa ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo adúláwọ̀ ìmọ́lẹ̀ wọ̀ ní wọ́ọ̀kùn lágbára ọlọ́run nàìjíríà ò ní bàjẹ́ Yorùbá náà ò ní bàjẹ́ gbogbo ibi tí arúgbódé tààtà gbòǹgbòdé ìrẹ́ la máa bá rẹ̀ lágbára ọlọ́run ìyanu ọlọ́run máa ṣẹlẹ̀ láyín gbogbo ibi tí arúgbódé tààtà gbòǹgbòdé nǹkan tó bá dáwọ́lé àmà yọrí sí rere lágbára ọlọ́run kò tí àwọn tó ṣíwájú wa tó ń bá dé a máa tún ṣe jù wọ́n lọ lágbára ọlọ́run àwọn alálẹ̀ àrùn àlọ́wọ́ ọlọ́run àrùn àlọ́wọ́. Somebody asked a question. Let me answer the person. The person said, do you see Jesus as a philosopher? There is that bit of him, but he, in his fullness, made a claim to divinity. I think that's actually what makes him quite interesting. He made a claim to divinity. So I see him as the Son of God, but I see him also as a philosopher, because you can study his work, his words, and understand his philosophy. And people have done that, by the way, and people still do that, by the way. You can just look at him from a philosophical standpoint, but it's more than that. But you can study Christian philosophy or Christ, or you can see that in Christology, in the study of Christ, you know. But thank you very much for that question, and thank you everybody for being here. May God bless you. And Igbola Bruce and Okola láàrin wa lágbára Ọlọ́run in tó kù kọ́dún fi parí la máa fi lo ọdún tó ń bọ̀ òun níṣẹ́ lẹ́yìn wa o lágbára Ọlọ́run gbogbo ibi tí tá à ń retí ohun rẹ̀ láti ibi kí tá ti máa retí ohun rẹ̀ and Igbola Bruce láti bẹ̀ ọ́ ìlà máa rí lágbára Ọlọ́run. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. I'll see you tomorrow 4 p.m. if your time, West African time. Have a lovely, lovely night rest. God bless you. Thank you, West. So he was the greatest philosopher. I would argue, yes, he was. Fantastic man. But yeah, we can learn all of those things together. All right, see you tomorrow. God bless you.